Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's event, Can Business Glorify God with Evan Keller. My name is Carson Weitnauer, and I serve as the Executive Director for Uncommon Pursuit. And Evan and I have known each other for over 20 years, so he has a lot of scary stories he will not share about me today. And likewise, Evan. Two of the main reasons that I serve with Creating Jobs, a nonprofit that Evan founded, is first, Evan, it's your example. Just watching your life has inspired me consistently. And second, that's not enough, but we regularly hear these amazing stories of entrepreneurs whose lives have been transformed, and the thing it's done for their community and their families and their churches and all this stuff has really touched my heart. And so I am thrilled we get to do this event together as friends, but also just to answer this question: can business glorify God? Kind of audacious, kind of idealistic, you might say. And so, Evan, welcome to the Uncommon Pursuit event here. And please introduce yourself to everyone and explain for us, like, why does this question matter to you?
Awesome. Thank you, Carson. It's a pleasure to be here and appreciate the mutual blackmail there you added in. Yeah, so a lot of those stories are in the back country, out in the mountains where no one would ever know if they were true or not. Anyway, good to be with everyone. Love what's happening here at Uncommon Pursuit. And just to answer Carson's question, who am I? A follower of Jesus. That's first and foremost. Also, a husband to Karen for 30 years. We just celebrated our 30th last month. And as far as my
That's awesome.
involvement in God's body, I'm involved in both an African American predominant church and a white one as well, because I feel called to be a bridge builder and to really bring out the unity, enjoy the unity God has given us in Christ, and to see the different facets of God's glory in His body. So, as far as what Carson alluded to, I do enjoy outdoor adventures of various types, playing sports in the mountains with my 14 nephews and nieces, or friends like Carson, and so those are some of my interests. But Carson and I met back in our InterVarsity days. We worked for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship for quite a while, and we're colleagues in different states. I'm in Florida, but we would gather at some of our regional events and work together, and that was a pleasure and kind of the start of our friendship. So it's been great knowing Carson and seeing his passion for God and for people. So should I kind of share a bit of the journey, Carson, on how like that InterVarsity piece led me into where I am now?
Yeah, because I think most people will hear campus minister, no credibility on business glorifying God. So yeah, how did business become part of your story, and why do you think it should glorify God?
Right. Okay. So yeah, in my 19 years with InterVarsity, I love challenging students to grow in their faith, to pursue the kingdom of God with all of their hearts, and I really grew in my own heart for the poor, the vulnerable,
Hmm.
and saw that God really does care about the flourishing of people in every aspect of their lives. And so that was kind of catalyst number one of three. The second was a conversation with Karen about her Lyme disease. She was nearly bedridden for several years and kind of desperate to figure out a solution to some of her chronic health issues, and really noticed that my nonprofit salary wasn't allowing us to explore, different options that weren't covered by insurance, et cetera. So I prayed about it, thought about it, and dumb as I was, I started a business 4 days later with no capital, no experience, no training. Pretty much not knowing that I was jumping off a cliff. Um, but I learned as I went, and that was the start of my journey. So I was out knocking on doors, selling my smile in a business I'll tell you about in a second. And then the third catalyst was, after I started my business, I had no idea prior that business could be such a force for good. The way I was when I treated my customers right, my employees right, my vendors right, the joy of generosity started to well up and overflow. Is these relationships, profits, influence, time, all of these things had amazing new impact on the people around me that I hadn't known in my previous career. So I was like, wow, there's something to this. So I started to put the two and two together. It's like, wow, God's heart for the poor, using everything God's given you in the kingdom for his glory. And now, hey, he's given me a business. And I see that this can not only help me serve my community, but why not multiply that out and help others around the world, especially the poor and vulnerable, who need economic opportunity the most, to use this vehicle to not only take care of their own families, but to be a blessing to everyone around them. So that was kind of the three little catalysts that brought me to start the nonprofit Creating Jobs Inc., in which Carson and I serve together joyfully. So, I could go into more about the current state of our business if you'd like, 16 years later, where it has taken me and what I've learned in that process, if you think your listeners would want to hear that.
Yeah, well, I think, Evan, there's a lot of skepticism about this question. I've heard people say, I will never do business with someone who claims to be a Christian, because the last time I did that, I got ripped off. And I think there's also kind of like that subtle, prosperity, approach to all of this. Like, I had a heart for the poor, and then I realized I was poor. I started a business. I was able to pay for my wife's healthcare expenses. It worked out for me. And if you start a business, you too can be healthy and wealthy and wise. And so I'd like to dig in a little bit to what difference does your Christian faith make to how the policies and the systems and the way in which you actually run Tree Work now as an owner? I mean, what difference does it make to your employees that you're a Christian?
Right. Yeah, great question. So you hit it on the head. Really, the way I view my employees is the biggest thing that has been shaped by my faith. And it wasn't immediate. I kind of walked into business just with the general idea of, American capitalism. Like, okay, I'm the, Lone Ranger entrepreneur riding into town, and I'm going to, conquer this beast. And I have my, physical tools and my personnel tools, and, we're going to make everything efficient, and we're going to crank out some profits, right? But over time, as God continued to use business as part of my discipleship, there's a shift from seeing employees as a cost of production that we should try to squeeze, to be more efficient, into like seeing them truly as image bearers of God that are growing into their full potential. And their time at work, which I steward, can be a big part of helping them grow in their gifts and reach their full potential as image bearers of God. So, really changing the way I see my 27 employees from a subhuman view to a truly human one. And there's a couple different programs, and you mentioned policies that I'll share that explain like how that shift in mindset has actually played out in my employees' experience at work. So one of them is a conflict resolution process that we put into place to promote harmony, respect, and appreciation in our culture at work. So we crafted this to help employees see from the other person's perspective, when they get into a disagreement or misunderstanding. Another one is something recently I've done is called celebrating each other. So we took a week per employee to focus on honoring them and bringing out the best traits in them. So I started it, I had this idea Christmas morning, and then January 1, I wrote a page full of what I appreciated about one particular employee. and asked all of the teammates to jump in and say what they saw as their strengths of that person. We compiled that into a certificate at the end of the week, and the following week, that person, it was their turn to honor someone of their choice, and on and on. And we just finished the cycle of honoring each of our employees, and it did several things. It like obviously made people feel appreciated, but also maybe challenged them to be the best version of themselves. It's like my brother is my business partner. You know, he's really awesome. He said, "Wow, now I have to be this version of me all the time." So anyway, and then the last thing I'll share as far as a program that honors people as people is our mortgage assistance program. I was reading Deuteronomy 25:4, which says, "Don't muzzle the ox as it treads out the grain." And so I'm like, wow, okay, so people, animals, tools, you know, whatever you are using in your business, really need to enjoy part of the fruit of their labors, you know. And so I went to bed thinking about how could I put this into practice at Tree Work Now. And boom, at midnight on my pillow, it came to me, hey, I'm building a pretty nice house for my family. Why can't I help my employees to create, to pay down or buy a home of their own? So 3 of my employees have now already taken advantage of this program, have received $10,000 each as a matching savings grant towards getting a new mortgage or paying down one so that they can build long-term wealth. And it helps to, honor them and show them that, hey, we care about you in your personal life more than just what you can do for our company, but we want you to prosper and flourish in your lives with your family.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging. You know, building a workplace environment, conflict's gonna come up, and having a way that allows people to express those grievances and concerns, but maybe find reconciliation if that's possible. Uh, creating a workplace that is people look forward to coming to work with their coworkers because things have been worked out. That's a big deal. Um, but I think if I was an employee, the one I would feel most sad you care is the mortgage assistance program because now you're putting money into saying I matter. And so I think that's pretty encouraging. So when it comes to money, how has running a business changed how you experience money, like your attitude towards money, your heart towards money? How has that shifted during this time?
Yeah, so I remember an experience at Chapter Camp, which is the InterVarsity student training event that Carson and I worked with a team of others to do every summer. And one of the sessions I taught was about money. And so I was honestly really laid on some guilt for being wealthy in a country that, okay, we're at the top 10% or even 1% in some cases, even on a teacher salary compared to the rest of the world. And so I highlighted kind of Jesus' harsh parables against the greedy, but there are aspects of his stories that I didn't notice until I started a business. So take the Good Samaritan. You know, his compassion is rightly legendary, but do we think about his years of diligent labor that enabled him to have a donkey, that served as the ambulance to save the person who was suffering on the road? The same goes for the cash that he had to give to the innkeeper for the room and board, for the recovering victim. And then let's take it one step further and consider the innkeeper himself or herself, right? I mean, whose years of building a viable business on a dangerous road was not easy. So, think about those unseen investments over time, doing business in a difficult place to serve the basic needs of people, and how in the end, at least in this fictional, we think, story, that God used those daily, very generic, investments to take care of someone who could have died if they had to go all the way to Jericho, to find medical assistance. So everyday business people are God's answer to prayer for daily bread. And, money is a big part of that. Martin Luther puts it vividly, maybe bluntly: God milks the cows through the milkmaids. So he also said, if silver and gold are things evil in themselves, then those who keep away from them deserve to be praised. But if they are good creations of God, which we can use both for the needs of our neighbors and for the glory of God, is not a person silly, yes, even unthankful to God, if he refrains from them as though they were evil? So think back to the conference, seminar on the evils of money. Only after starting a business did it strike me that my donors' generous use of money enabled me to spend my time and to buy the plane ticket that got me to the conference in the first place. And then, Carson, you're involved with Lausanne. They have a wealth creation manifesto, and it points out that wealth must be created before it can be given. And, Paul said it too in 2 Corinthians 9, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous. So it reminds me of the location where our conference was held. It was at a resort quality, spot, Sharp Top Cove, owned by Young Life. And, it provided a level of quality and comfort like unlike any camp I'd ever seen. And so that allowed students to really enjoy God's creation and experience Him, and, through the love of those deep-seated pocketed donors that helped to build that camp, right? So if I could rewind and teach that seminar again, I would probably still warn that wealth can be dangerous, right? It can seduce our hearts towards pride and idolatry and spill over into other heart diseases like entitlement, possessiveness, envy. But I would also explore with the students, help them to imagine, what is the potential of a redemptive use of money?
So I think that's kind of an unusual change, Evan, because a lot of people would start with greed is good, more money, more happiness kind of approach, and maybe over time realize they could share. You were more on the, money is the root of all evil, and over time you realize that there are some good things that business and wealth can accomplish. I do want to look at it from the other angle, though. So I've been watching the documentary about WeWork recently, and it looks like from all the reporting, Adam Newman and his wife basically suckered investors out of billions of dollars. So their investors watched. One scene is they just have a guy holding a $20 bill. He lights it on fire and he says, "This is your business model." I mean, he's literally burning money at a meeting to explain how wasteful the WeWork model is. And then the employees took out personal loans from family to buy stock options. And when the IPO failed, like they were left with nothing. And so employees got wrecked, investors got wrecked, and the Newmans left, billionaires. And, so you go, oh, okay, well, that's just secular people. And then I go and I read the investigative reporting on Ramsey Solutions. Dave Ramsey's all about money and, a Christian view of money. And they even have one of their core values is righteous living. But people who worked there have talked about NDAs and abuse and blackmail and all kinds of practices that were deeply destructive and damaging to their lives. And so, I mean, we can find examples in Christians or non-Christians where money seems to have been destructive and overruled ethical concerns. And that cannot glorify God. So why is it that when people think about business glorifying God, I mean, at least, that's my starting point here. And I work with creating jobs, but I think people would say, just help us understand, why is it that it goes wrong so often?
Yeah, it is very sad. The short answer is that businesses are run by and filled with fallen people. So we're fallen, yet we're redeemable. And
Right.
so, more specifically, I believe that selfish pride often leads entrepreneurs to glorify God rather than themselves, or themselves rather than God, through their
Right.
businesses. And so, you know, the false narrative is I built this and it is mine to serve my needs and wants. And that's a false narrative that still tempts me as well. So, for the health of my soul, you know, I've got to acknowledge God is the source of my gifts in business and the success of our company. And, you know, entrepreneurs tend to mimic the rich fool in Luke 12, you know, where Jesus was talking about this farmer who is the main type of entrepreneur in that agrarian society. And he filled his barns and he filled them again and built new barns. And it was all about, hey, this is, you know, eat, drink, and be merry. And 11 times in 3 sentences, he said, I, my, or me, you know? So it was all the selfish pride. It was like, look what I built. So it's nothing new. You know, American capitalism is, you know, has plenty of corruption, but it was there in Jesus' day as well. And so another scripture reminds us that this is a false narrative. Deuteronomy 8:17 through 18 reads, you may say to yourself, my power and my strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. So it was before Jesus, back with Moses' time, right? But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. So it can be like used for ill, but it can also be a spiritual gift. It says, you know, God has given you the gift to produce wealth. So it flips the narrative on its head. So if wealth creation is a gift from God and rejoicing, you know, to be part of the flow of blessings is God's intention for me, then wow, you know, that's pretty big. And so there's another author, Kelly Kapik, who said, we own nothing, but we manage everything. So that takes the
Mm.
selfish pride out of it, like, hey, this is not mine, but I do have a heavy responsibility to manage what God has entrusted to my care, but not just for me. You know, of course, God wants to bless me, but mostly he wants to use me as a conduit to bless others. So that's a paradigm shift that many in our affluent nations need to realize. And Bryant Myers, who wrote a classic book on poverty, Walking with the Poor, he said, instead of understanding themselves as productive stewards working for the well-being of their community, the non-poor act as if their gifts and position are somehow rightfully theirs or earned, and hence solely for themselves and their own well-being. And then, you know, if you have another minute on this topic, I have a thought about Christian entrepreneurs and why
Yes,
they
I'd
get
like to. I
sucked
think,
into a similar temptation.
yes, please.
Okay, with Christians, I feel like, yeah, they have some of these same selfish pride issues, but there's something called the sacred secular divide, I think, that plays
Mm.
into a wrong use of business. So their perspective's distorted by this false dichotomy between sacred and secular. So you can worship God on Sunday, but then say on Monday, what goes on at work is my business. You
Right.
know, so we'll probably circle back to this concept a little later, but for now I'm grateful for initiatives like Uncommon Pursuit that are helping people to integrate their faith into every part of their lives.
I think if I summed up what you just shared, Evan, it's going to take some journaling and some prayer and some honest heart-to-heart talking with some friends about the ways in which maybe I've lived as an owner with the owner mentality that I deserve this, I earned this, it's mine, I do with it as I please. This is who I am, this is my identity, my sense of self, my status, my value. I own this. Whether that's my bank account or my retirement account or my business or whatever, my house, you know, whatever possessions I have. And coming to realize that actually maybe those things own me. I am now enslaved to those things for my sense of self, and they've become my God, and I'm enthralled to them and maintaining them to maintain my sense of well-being. and realizing that what I thought was everything is actually maybe more of a prison and a limitation on becoming the person God wants me to be. And this other opportunity that you've explained is to be free, to be a steward, and to say, God, this is all from your hand. I get to steward it. What joy, what pleasure to steward this for the good of others around me and for the glory of your name. And how can I steward these resources in a way that when I meet you one day, you will say, well done, good and faithful servant. You have stewarded this in a way that reflected the character of your heavenly Father. And that owner to stewardship shift is just a totally different, like everything looks different once you get out of the ownership mentality and you're experiencing life as a steward. I think that's just a total game changer for anyone listening today. Um, so, Evan, I think one problem that a lot of us have is that sacred secular, distinction. And actually, one person when they registered for this event, maybe they're watching right now, they said, "Do you have any supporting scriptures for this?" Like they wanted to know, like, are there any scriptures that talk about business glorifying God? And so there's the challenge for you. Can you think of a single scripture, or maybe a few, that talk about how business is supposed to glorify God?
Right. Okay. Um, so let's go back to the Old Testament in the Mosaic Law. Deuteronomy. Um, I'm sorry. It's in two places. It's in Deuteronomy 24, but I'm going to read from Leviticus 19, 9 through 10. And this is a command to farmers in particular. And like I said, they were the main business owners in that day. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. So this idea of business for blessing, this purpose of God for business and for our work in general, to serve by creating value, is right there in Leviticus. And Tim Weinhold writes a really great article on this passage of Leviticus. And I can email it to you, evan@creatingjobs.org, if you send me a line, or even through Carson and Uncommon Pursuit, we can get you that resource if you want.
I can upload it as a free download in the community or link to it in the
Okay,
community so people can just click on it there.
great. And maybe the same with the Wealth Creation Manifesto by Lazan that we referenced earlier. So anyway, Tim Weinhold draws several lessons from this passage, and including, he points out that business engines should serve the poor, not just the profits of the business owner. And then good business creates direct relationships with the poor. So as there's, the widows, the orphans, the foreigner, the vulnerable of many kinds are gleaning along the edges of your field. They're in your workspace. You bump into them, you see them, you say hello. They might ask you for a bag to put in the grapes, and you might see them conversing with your employees. So it creates a familiarity in a relationship, and those relationships can create opportunities. We think of most of our listeners, maybe a job they have now or a job they had in the past, or even a volunteer position at church or in a nonprofit, came through someone they know who said, hey, this role really fits you. Would you consider it? Or I know somebody who can connect you with, a scholarship or, an internship or something that can help you move towards using your gifts in a purposeful way. So, yeah, good business creates relationships with the poor. Those relationships create opportunities, and then opportunities create dignity-enhancing work that provides for people's needs. So that's one way that business fulfills its purpose of glorifying God by creating value for others. And just last week on our Creating Jobs Academy, I heard Isaac Link, our um, associate for Latin America, was sharing these concepts to an academy of 15 folks with World Relief and training them to teach our curriculum to thousands of people. And he brought up this passage from Leviticus, actually. And one of the participants, the trainees, said, I know someone who's living that story. Can I tell
Wow.
you about it? His name is Felix Padilla. He's a Honduran farmer. He grows various fruit trees, corn, beans, etc. And of course, it's common for thieves to come in and steal your crops at night. Not so good. And you can imagine that some people are violently opposed to that, right? Because hey, there's a lot of investment there, and people just waltz on in and gather whatever they want for free. But he took a different approach because of his Christian faith. I'm not sure whether it was tied to this particular passage or not, but he showed up in his cornfield one day, saw people stealing corn. Instead of chasing them off with a rifle, he grabbed some bags from his truck and brought them and said, hey, you know, how much corn do you need to feed your family tonight? Can I help you? Do you need an extra bag? He started to converse with them. It created a sense of relationship like we were talking about. And he even took them home. He like, okay, let's put your bags of corn that you stole from me in the back of my truck, and let me take you home. Where do you live? And that engaged them in a sense of relationship, and they stopped stealing corn from him. They're like, hey, if you need some corn, ask, and we'll work something out. And I don't know if he gave them like paying jobs or not, but in the end, he ended up being the only one in that region who was raising crops and not having them stolen. So it helped his own business as well.
That's a remarkable story of looking at it from the other person's perspective and going, I'll bet these people are stealing because they've got kids crying through the night with hunger. Let me see what I can do to meet that need. And, next time I need some people to help with the harvest, I'll know who to call.
Right.
There's some people willing to work for corn, and we can figure a way out here. Now, Evan, part of your sharing from the margins is that Tree Work Now, you went from a guy with a chainsaw, cutting down trees in extremely unsafe ways, and
Very true.
barely living to tell the tale, to having some pretty expensive equipment, having trained teams, having positive reviews on social media, having an operation, and it's an established system. And so at this point in your life, you could have said, okay, we're going to start franchising this concept, and we're going to be the dominant tree services company in the United States and then the world. You could have gone big with this Tree Work Now concept. Or you could have just taken more cruises and enjoyed what this life has to offer you and taken some more relaxation time. And instead of those choices, you decided, I'm going to find a way to carve out some time to start a nonprofit and get creating jobs going so you could share your business expertise with the poor around the world. And so, what help us understand what motivated that decision to say, I'm going to take my extra and share this business knowledge and capacity building with the poor. What led you to that choice?
Well, first of all, there's no joy in simply maximizing profits. So obviously, you need profit to keep your doors open. It's like the air we breathe in business. It's 100% necessary. And so, yes, you have to watch your efficiencies and produce value that people are willing to pay for. But it's like air. Like we need it, but it's the baseline for survival. It's not your highest purpose in life. So, who wants to make breathing, the purpose of their life? Let's aim a little higher. So, for some entrepreneurs, they can use their best gifts at work every day and make their biggest impact through their business itself without starting a separate nonprofit. So I'm not saying my way is the only way,
Sure.
but my gifts are in business and in sharing in simple, practical steps how to start and grow a business that really blesses an entire community. So writing curriculum is one of the key ways that I do that. And I feel, I believe we feel the most alive when we're being creative because it mirrors our creator, right? And for me, the way I like to create the most is through writing. So, this kind of ties in my business acumen, which was a spiritual gift I didn't know I had until, in my midlife. And then writing, which has also kind of been a gift I've been discovering and growing in. So while I hope our nonprofit blesses millions, I'm also just selfish. Like, I want more joy, you know? And there's no greater joy than developing and using your gifts in partnership with God. So we should all aim to be co-workers with the Almighty.
So for you, it was an analysis of God, what gifts have you given to me? And how do I steward these in the best way possible? And you realized part of faithful stewardship was helping Tree Work Now be a profitable business. So your employees can have jobs and your customers can have great tree service and all the other things that come out of that business that make your community a better place to be. But you also realized I've got this other part of what God's entrusted to me and I need to steward that too. And so that stewardship and that faithfulness led to creating jobs. So we've danced around creating jobs this whole time, but go ahead and tell us what is creating jobs, what's the vision and the mission, and what is it that creating jobs actually does?
Great. Well, it is really a privilege to serve with Carson and our board and our staff on creating jobs. Impoverished people do a lot with a little. Surviving really bleak conditions by depending on each other and on God. If they're equipped with the knowledge to start small businesses, these incredibly resourceful and resilient people truly begin to thrive. But most still have little access to just those simple and practical steps to start businesses that provide for their families and bless their entire community. So our partner organizations that we work with are working to change that by using our courses to catalyze the mindsets, relationships, and the habits that are needed to flourish. So our mission is to equip high-capacity partners with transformational courses that raise up entrepreneurs. So Compassion International, Africa Inland Mission, World Relief, Church of God, universities at home and abroad, we're honored to partner with these and many others to help fight poverty through business. And, with COVID pushing millions more, back into severe poverty worldwide, people more now than ever are looking for tools to create their own economic opportunities that really affirm their dignity and awaken their sense of hope for their families and communities. So as we work with these partners around the world, we've discovered that many organizations want to raise up entrepreneurs, but they don't have the time or the ability to create their own effective business training curriculum. They want something that's ready to go so they can stay focused on serving their clients and providing them with additional value without taking years to develop their own business training curricula and courses. So that's where we come in. A big part of our unique value is our curriculum, which is offered through a Train the Trainer program, plus lots of strategic ongoing support to really multiply impact in the communities that our partners serve in around the world. And then we have 4 levels of curriculum, and I could say a couple sentences on each if you think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I realized sometimes I give our curricula away, but I realized I've got the Heart of Wealth, which is a lot of personal storytelling from you about spreading God's joy. And I think, Evan, you have most impactfully connected generosity and joy for me. And so usually generosity is, I'll be honest, my initial thought is sacrifice and less happiness because that's going to mean I have less to go on, right? And this book has helped me understand that no, generosity actually creates joy. And then I've got Opportunity Makers, which is the first book. This is really to help younger people, right, understand that opportunity can happen. And a lot of the contexts we work in are fatalistic. And there's this sense that given gangs and corruption and poverty and lack of medical access and lack of infrastructure, there's no brighter future available here. And your book gives them a biblical context to say, no, God can make something out of that context. And then I'm missing Start Book, which helps people start a business. But I do have Grow Book here, and this really helps someone take their business to the next level. So that's my summary of our 4 stages of curricula. But did I miss it?
Pretty darn good.
Okay,
Here's the fourth one, Start Book.
Start Book. There it is.
So yeah, Opportunity Makers helps people get in the right mindset to even think about building for their future in a positive biblical way. Start Book helps them see the biblical underpinnings of their character development and business development,
Oh yeah.
and really 7 easy, well, simple but not easy steps to start a
If only it was
successful
easy
business.
too.
And then, like you said, Growbook helps them take an existing business to the next level. And then Heart of Wealth helps them to see, okay, now that I've created value, how can I optimize that for impact in my community and around the world? So there's a quote that really ties together how our curriculum works. The main goal is transformation, right? And I'm struck by what Bryant Myers wrote in Walking with the Poor. It seems to exactly describe what our curriculum does. He says transformational development works towards changed people who have discovered their true identity as children of God and who have recovered their true vocation as faithful and productive stewards of gifts from God for the well-being of all.
Wow. Well, if you are watching this on YouTube, you can just rewind by 30 seconds and listen to that again. That was rich. Because this is so much more than maximizing economic output, isn't it? And this is about seeing image bearers flourish and seeing the way we were always intended to love each other be manifest in our communities and seeing people realize their capacity and the joy of not only meeting their own dreams, but of seeing other people reach their dreams, and the hope and the joy of people living in those shalom relationships. I mean, this is a much more expansive vision of transformation than I think many people have when it comes to business. And we live in such a flat and narrow and stifling vision for business that we've really missed out on the bigger and better vision God has for us. Uh, so, Evan, these are all high ideals. You're a very idealistic person. That's part of what I like you. But I want to hear some stories. I know people listening want to hear some stories like, so what? Tell us a story of transformation or two from creating jobs. What difference has this actually made in someone's life and community?
Yeah, we'd love to share that in great summary, Carson. So let me tell you about Hector Uceda in Honduras. So he is a furniture manufacturer. He has a huge warehouse where he produces furniture for dozens of customers that are then sold on retail floors throughout the country of Honduras. So he has dozens of employees, and he is someone that we had the privilege of mentoring and growing with, and helping him to refine some of his systems and his work with his employees. And one particular employee really stands out in the way that he invested in him. His name is Jairo, and Jairo was in a gang and had a pretty bad temper. And so Hector is a huge guy with a big smile, and he has kind of a real father's heart. And he took Jairo under his wing and helped him work through his anger issues. He didn't fire him the first time. He kind of lost his cool, but he helped him get that under control and find a productive way to use his time and his gifts. And over time, Jairo became Hector's best carpenter. He came in just as a wild kind of gang member, which, is a pretty bad problem in Honduras, and helped him really develop as a person to where he's really giving back and making a difference and providing furniture that people need every day. And so Hector's vision also goes beyond just his own business. He wants to create drug rehab centers in Honduras to help, curb the drug and gang and violence kind of cycle there. And even within his own business, he wants to eventually create 2,000 jobs so that he can help more people avoid, kind of a fatalistic and a lifestyle that's detrimental. One quick story of a meal we shared with Hector. We were at a pizza place in Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. Took me a while to learn how to say that name. And we were sharing, he asked, what are you doing in other countries? And, how are things going? And so we shared about a baker in Haiti. And this was not long after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And Celeste is the name of the baker that we told Hector about. And we said, Celeste has a lot of ambition and love for his community and his family, but his bakery is broken down. Like the walls are cracked, the roof has been, caved in, and he needs help. We've got to figure out a way to help him restart his business so that he can continue to flourish and create jobs for his community. So we thought Hector would maybe, have a frown and a word of encouragement for us, or even a prayer, which is powerful, for Celeste. But not only did he do those things, but on the spot, he pulled out his wallet and he took out $200, which is a lot in Honduras, put it on the table and said, would you please get this to Celeste to repair his roof so he can restart his business? And that just touched my heart. I mean, and also it was humbling for us as creating jobs to, wow, it's cool to be a conduit of God's people across nations and cultures who would never meet this side of eternity. And yet now they're blessing each other and being the body of Christ. And Celeste went on to not only restart his business, but to expand his business. And we mentored him as well. And he went from a few employees and a couple ovens to doubling his sales force on the streets of Leogan, Haiti, where they now ask for his muffins by name, by brand, as we helped him with his branding. And then, it goes on and on. Like, he helped several competitors start businesses. And one time, a competitor called him up discouraged and said, I'm quitting. My oven has died. I'm broke. Why go on? This business thing is way too hard. Celeste said, you're not quitting. In fact, I'm coming over with a batch of muffins I just made. You're going to sell those and get the money to repair your oven so you can keep going. You're not quitting. And this is a competitor. So it's that abundance, generosity mentality that we're trying to spread that's so biblical. And, not only does he help competitors, but he started a second bakery. Not making muffins, but now making French bread. And he created 12 jobs overnight. And I told him, man, it took me years to get up to 12 employees. And you're doing this overnight. And he's like, Evan, I could have put that money in my bank account, but I feel like I'm called to create jobs for my community, and that's why I'm doing this. And it was like, man, you're my hero.
That really is so humbling to be involved with creating jobs because, that $200, we don't know the story there, but that, whatever it was far more sacrificial generosity than we may have experienced in our own life, and showed that he was trusting God to meet his needs in a powerful way. And the way that spilled over to multiply joy and opportunity in a whole different country is so inspiring. And Evan, I know from serving with creating jobs for many years now, that's the tip of the iceberg of stories of transformation. I want to ask you this final question here. you've given us a vision for how business can reflect God's glory. But again, another kind of argument from within the Christian sphere is if we're going to do missions as an individual or as a church, we should only focus on evangelism, discipleship, and church planting. You know, maybe medical missions could be included, but then that's just get someone in the door to treat their eyes and share the gospel with them, right? And so it comes back down to evangelism, discipleship, church planting. Business is not really part of Christian mission. And so I know you disagree, but why do you disagree?
Yeah, great question. This is a tough one to answer very succinctly, so cut me off as I go on, and we could also send your listeners a tool that explains this in a little more detail. But basically, another entrepreneur in the developing world, his name is Wilfredo, and he makes commercial windows. So he has a workshop on the ground floor of his building. On the floor above, he has a church sanctuary that he's donated space for his church to meet. So we have workshop below, sanctuary above. This leads us to an important question. Which is a higher calling, church or business? So, where does this idea come from that, church work is more important than God's work in the world? That spiritual work has more value than physical work. It's really not from the Bible. We don't have time to track the Greek and the Gnostic roots of that distortion, but N.T. Wright said this to kind of correct it. The central message of the New Testament isn't that we are to escape this world and go to heaven, but rather that God's sovereign saving rule would come to birth on earth as in heaven. The story of all four Gospels, he goes on, is not the story of how God came in Jesus to rescue souls for a disembodied, otherworldly heaven. It is the story of how God in Jesus became king on earth as in heaven. So really everything matters to God. Heaven and earth, spiritual and physical, soul and body. Jesus is Lord of it all. So this sacred secular divide comes from this misunderstanding of the gospel. It's really an abbreviation of it. So, I like what Andy Crouch says in Culture Matters. He says, beginnings and endings matter. So take this book, for example. Suppose we tore out, the first chapter and we tore out the last chapter, would you have a full understanding of what is being communicated? And really, Crouch is saying that that's what we've done to our gospel. We rightfully focus on fall and redemption, which are the middle two chapters, but we forget about creation and restoration. And those two are such big keys. And, I could go on and on about that if we still have time.
Well, let me. One question we're getting from someone watching right now is just doing evangelism within the workplace. Does that? I mean, that's part of what you do. That's part of what our entrepreneurs do. But can you speak to that if we are thinking about, well, I do business so that I can engage people in my context with the gospel? Is that what you have in mind, or are you speaking to something different?
That is certainly important. And everything we do needs to bring glory to God. Paul said, whatever you do in word or in deed, do all to the glory of God. So the deed part isn't really sharing your faith, right? It's doing whatever work God has called you to do using his gifts. So that's obviously an important part. But, God calls us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And if you're in business, God calls you to create value and wealth for your community. And there's all sorts of value. The Wealth Creation Manifesto that we referenced earlier, it talks about spiritual, physical, intellectual, all different types of wealth that we create. And God wants his people to flourish. God cares about every part of life, right? Because we're whole people. So to provide for people's bodily needs, God, works through businesses to answer those prayers for daily bread or for medical care, like the innkeeper we mentioned earlier, right? So God uses employers to provide meaningful work that helps people to reflect their creator, you know? And then small business provides margin where people have not only meaningful work, but they have a little extra to give towards their church or towards a school or towards a community project. So all of these are important. Daily provision, meaningful work, community investment, and all of these help people to fulfill their God-given purpose and thereby bring God glory.
Yeah. And so, again, you're just kind of taking this dichotomy, I feel, and going down a couple of steps so that it's not like either I'm doing Christian activity or I'm not, but rather all of this is devoted to the Lord as a steward of what He's given to me. And so, whether it is sharing the gospel or, making sure that the the financial reports are accurate, all of that is connected to this vision you have for business. Uh, Evan, one question that came in was people were registering is they asked, is the business not supposed to maximize profits on purpose, or is the business maximizing profits so that you have more to give away to charity? I mean, it's kind of like an either or, like, well, we're gonna reduce the amount of profit we make because we have some other agenda here, or we're gonna squeeze all the profit we can out of this, and then that's gonna mean more for us to share. And I think also that ties into, like in the American system, there's kind of an ethical obligation to the shareholders of a publicly traded company to, return profit to the owners. And if you say, hey, we could have returned 10 million to you this year, but we wanted to glorify God, so it's only 9 million. The shareholders are going to be upset that cost them $1 million because of this faith agenda. So, as a business owner, I mean, are you trying to maximize your profits or not, and why?
No. Leviticus clearly says, don't harvest every grape. That's clearly not maximizing profit. So profit is valuable, but there's other types of value that are higher. So business needs to create value that's both intrinsic and instrumental. So your questioner mentioned the instrumental type. Okay, I'm going to maximize profit so I can, do something with those profits later outside the business, and that's great. But intrinsically, the way if you're not paying your employees well enough, then you might maximize profit, but you're not maximizing a bigger and better value of helping their families to thrive. And in the end, it could backfire as well. You think you're maximizing profit by squeezing salaries, but then you have disgruntled workers, and how is that going to make, happy employees make happy customers? So it's not really always an either or. Obviously, we want to grow our profits over time, but there are other values that are even more important, and God calls us to steward every part of our lives and our leadership to glorify Him. So every part needs to glorify God.
Yeah, that really, I think, will require anyone who is involved in business to spend a lot more time in prayer and examining our hearts and what our hearts want, but also some pretty candid conversation with other people similarly situated to ask that much more complicated question. Now that I need to maximize all kinds of value as a faithful steward of God's, and He's the ultimate shareholder here, now I've got to do a lot more thinking about how I balance these competing interests than if I kind of just simplify it down and say, I'm gonna maximize profit. And one good way to maximize profit is slavery, but I think we all agree that that's inappropriate. So we all have some ethical sense that maximizing profit cannot be the only goal of a business, and so everyone agrees there's a limit there. And instead of thinking about this as a limit, I think your question is prompting us to ask, how can I make the pie bigger? How can I faithfully steward this so that everything flourishes in this ecosystem? And that's such an exciting question to pursue, whatever we're doing with our lives. All right, Evan, this is a total self-interested question for me and for you. Let's say someone's heard these stories and they would like to get involved with creating jobs to help business glorify God. What could they do to get involved with this mission?
Yes, five things. They can sign up to receive our newsletter and join our prayer team on our website, creatingjobs.org. Number two, you can read The Heart of Wealth that Carson mentioned earlier and learn how others are using, their wealth to serve while sharpening, your biblical understanding of wealth creation as a spiritual gift. And this could also expand your vision of alleviating poverty through business. Number three, you could explore using our business training curriculum in your church, your school, an organization that you work in, or perhaps you can connect us to a nonprofit, whether it's domestic or international, that really is interested in using business as a way of fighting poverty. Let's see. Number four, you can invest your talent or treasure to help us to translate our curriculum into more languages and build online courses to help us really multiply our impact. And number five, you can use your public speaking skills or cross-cultural skills or your video editing skills or whatever gift God has given you, whether it's writing stories about some of these entrepreneurs that we're encountering. And you can serve on our training team and help us train our partner organizations either virtually or in-person trips to visit our partners around the world. So any of those five would really help us to raise up more developing world entrepreneurs for the glory of God. So thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I will say that I look forward to our board meetings and I love getting the newsletter. And I have just found this to be such a satisfying experience, Evan, because for years I felt burdened about the daily experience of the global poor. But I always felt so dissatisfied with the options I had to help. It felt like I could give to help emergency needs after like a natural disaster or something like that, and I was willing to do so. But I didn't feel like that was going to change things in a structural way or in a long-term way, and I wanted some way to help that wasn't just charity. I mean, charity is good. I'm all for what, emergency relief people do. That's a vital way for us to help out. But I wanted something that would just raise the fundamental level, and I didn't know how to do that. And so when you explained what you were doing, I just was like, finally, this is a way I can like wholeheartedly like contribute and know that it's going to lead to multiplication of impact. And so that for me is the main reason I just love it and just am so excited about it. And I wish we had 1,000 times more people who had that similar like passion for creating jobs and this mission. Well, Evan, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us and your thinking. You have done tons of research from the scriptures and good thinking about business to give us a theology of business today. And that has been, I think, eye-opening for anyone who's listened. And I think some people who've watched you might feel like that was good to receive it, but I need to actively process this. And that's what the Uncommon Pursuit community is for, is it's our core conviction that passive reception of information is like nowhere near as transformational as actively writing it out. And if you take the time to write your thoughts down from this talk and share those in the Uncommon Pursuit community and get feedback from others, that written dialogue as you challenge yourself to really think it through is going to lead to far more transformation than just eating nachos and watching this on your couch. Though I love nachos and sitting on couches too. So no judgment. I'm just saying like transformation happens through participation. And that's what we value in Uncommon Pursuit. So please check us out at uncommonpursuit.net. I hope you'll join us for another event. Evan, thank you for the work you do. And if you need tree services in the Orlando area, Tree Work Now is the place to go. But if you want to be involved in business for global good, check us out at creatingjobs.org. This has been a blast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.